This is Rav, as I said, Rav Srayas of Devlitsky. Every calendar, every luach, in every shul, Charaidi shul, will be quoting him, an accepted Gadol. Say he's around in 67, 68, and he has a reaction to this event. Okay?
Positive?
Let me just read it through, okay?
Okay.
So here's what he says. So it's just a couple of pages. We'll be able to hopefully get through it. We have a few precious minutes to hopefully get through it over here. What do we do about setting up a new day on the calendar year? Okay, I cannot stress enough. I was right, Devlitsky from Bnei Brak, and that's where he had his shul, his base medrash in Bnei Brak, all his psaks that went out to the whole Charaidi world. This is from him. Okay. So he says there's a minhag in the Jewish people for generations to make a holiday, a day of simcha and hoda'ah, when they are saved from maves to chayim, from death to life. That's a minhag. Okay, he says it makes sense, and it's from sources within Chazal, and that's part of our Masorah, our tradition, that what? That we have hakarat Hatov, thanks to Hashem, when He does something for us. So it makes sense. And he says that you have diyunim, discussions in this case, among our giants. The Ibn Ezra on the Torah writes that when you have a great miracle happen to you, v'kavata yom simcha ki me Purim, make a holiday like Purim. Ibn Ezra on the Torah writes this. And then he says, the Chidah writes that if you have a Suda on this day to talk about the miracle that God did for you and your community, whatever that miracle is, that's called the Sudat Mitzvah. The Chassam Sofer, we're talking about the giants of the last few hundred years, writes to go ahead and have some commemoration for the miracle that God did for you, and whatever it was, whatever the miracle was, you were saved from death to life. It is a mitzvah from the Torah, the Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer. And it's from the Torah to do such a thing. And he says, and he talks about celebrating that year and all future years to remember the miracle that God did, that He saved your community.
Hallel with a bracha?
Let me go step by step.
Okay.
Thank you. Yedu'im lanu. We know of more than 80 days, 80 days, we know of 80 days that were set up by different communities over the centuries to celebrate a victory where they went from death to life. And he gives examples, such as Purim Frankfurt. It was called Purim Frankfurt. They made a new yom called Purim Frankfurt. Why? And he's going to tell us in a moment what it was about. B'Sefer Yosef Ometz, Adar Yishu Kavanah l'Mishtev l'Simcha. Shalom, we don't say Tachanun. Okay? Vayikrosh Vayisho Purim Vizhnitz, so we call Vinchanz, another one. Hashem Divrei Nisa, because miracles happen there. So we made it that it's going to be Dugma Yimei Purim. Just like Purim, we celebrate the victory and the salvation, we do that also. Purim Tiveria. There was a Purim Tiveria, and that's mentioned also. Why? What's that about? Azachum b'nei Yisrael b'Beit HaKnesset b'sasam l'simcha. Rav Chaim Abulafia set up this day. Beirech HaGomel. They were saved from a disaster. They said HaGomel together. They said Hallel and Nishmas, like we do in the big Pesukei Zimra on Shabbos. And they would sing like a moed, like a yontif. And all the people of Tiveria took upon themselves that every year on the Daled, the 4th of Chodesh Kislev, it will be a day of Mishta v'Simcha like Purim. And because God saved us from Maves to Chayim. So he says, so Rav Devlitsky, we see this in our history from communities. Rav Abulafia, Tiveria, Chassam Sofer, Frankfurt, from communities. It was Zionism for hundreds of years before Zionism. Then he says, the Chaya Adam, Another one. Chai Adam was one of the greatest posek of the last few centuries. And Chai Adam was a student of the Gra. There was a fire in his town. And his wife was injured, but they were saved and they weren't killed. They made a Purim on that day every year to thank Hashem for the miracle. And then, listen to this. Yemei Charadav Roleinu, the days of fear that we had here in Israel over the past few months and the last year, and the Nisim Gedolim V'Yeshua Gedola, and the huge salvation that happened to us, Mechayavim Behechleit, demands upon us to make a day of Hodaya and Simcha every year to remember the Nisim of Hashem. And he says, if you take a look at some of the days that were set up in the history, the 80 days, take a look at some of them and compare them to the 6-day war. He says it's a joke, it's a farce. And he gives an example. Nivdok, let's go look at Frankfurt. What happened? There was a chashash, a fear in Frankfurt a few centuries ago, she'porim yahu pogrom, that the Gentiles are going to make a pogrom against the Yehudim on a specific day. The day came and it went, nothing happened. So they made Purim Frankfurt, the fact that nothing happened, they were saved. Purim's a Nishma, and then the Chassam Sofer, who lived in Pressburg, he already moved. But since he was born in Frankfurt, even though it was a century later, he kept it. Purim Frankfurt. He says, let's look at this. Hayesh Ezo Hashva'ah, is there any comparison between Purim Frankfurt, which we don't even know if what? They were planning an attack. It was a rumor. We don't know if they're planning it or not. Hayachashas for the pogrom. And if the guy even thought about it, can you compare that to 67? We had Nasi Yamach Shemo down south, moving thousands and thousands of troops and tanks into that area. The UN Yamach Shemam V'Zichronam, then and now, they are evil. And what did they do then? They were the buffer zone between us and Egypt. NASA wanted to move in, so the UN just simply did what? Move out. Not bring the whole world against NASA.
He threw them out.
And they just went.
But you can't make a new youngster. How do you make a new
I can't. A Gadol Hador can, based on sources. Now, he goes, so then you have them. NASA took control over all the armies. You have Jordan on our east. You have Syria, Lebanon on the north. And they're ready to destroy us. And they're announcing it. And our good friends in America says, don't shoot first.
Who, Johnson said that?
That's what they told us. Just like Biden said, take the win with the 300 missiles from Iran. So we have to know, our friends, how much you can rely on our friends. And therefore, we were ready to die. 80,000 graves were dug, prepared. And that was Mavis. And we went from Mavis, there was no way that man for man, tank for tank, plane for plane, we could win. There was zero chance. And only with this brilliant plan of destroying the Air Force before the war started, that was our only chance. And even the chance of that working was slim. To avoid all the radars, to fly so low, 60 meters above the ground, it was insanity. But we did it, and Hashem blessed our heroic soldiers, and we won.
Chazdei Hashem.
And it's unbelievable chesed. He says, you're going to make a Purim, which would happen almost 100 times from people. Rabbis made Purims in that town. The Chai Adam, you don't get from than the Chai Adam. Massive posek of the Gra. And said that you can and should mark a new calendar day. That's what they all did. So Purim Frankfurt, because they think maybe we're going to be attacked. And for centuries they carry on with it. Here, 3 million Jews here in Israel at that time.
And 67?
Ready, I think it was about 3 million. Ready to go, they're going to die. We're done. The famous line, last one out, turn off the lights. And then you don't do a Yom Mishteh for. Wow, this is Rav Charaidi Gadol. Obviously, did the Charaidi world accept this? Not at all.
He was
But
living here in 67?
He was
in
here.
Bnei Brak?
He was here. He was in Bnei Brak. He was here. So this is an unbelievable statement here. Then he goes and he a few more lines, and he says the following. So he says that there's no comparison. Lutumeinu, in our innocence, I thought, I thought everyone is going to mark this on their calendar. Dati-Lumi, Charaidi, Hasidus, everyone. He says, I thought everyone's going to do this. Mikatzeh lekatzeh. Because the Gezerah wasn't on Chilonim. It wasn't on Dati-Lumi. It wasn't on Charidim. The Gezerah was on whom?
Jews.
Every Jew. So every Jew who was subject to death should be thanking God, he says. And that's, I thought, we're all going to get together. So he says, Adain lo kayamim tipshim ke'ela b'toch yimeinu hacham v'non. I don't think we have any people that foolish that think, oh no, it wasn't against me, it was only against him. I don't think we have anyone that foolish in our nation. I certainly hope we don't. So then I was shocked that the first year came and went, and the only one that spoke about this was the Rabbanut of Israel, based on the Gedolim in the Dati-Lumi Rabbanut. That was the only one who spoke about this.
Rav Kook.
So he was already gone. But
His son.
He wasn't the Rav Rashi, but either way, Vasudas Mitzvah Daya. And he says, Rovu Bokakara, so the majority of people knew something big. They had a Suda, but Marbe Hatzar, but to my great sorrow, many shuls and yeshivas did nothing. So I said, okay, maybe that was the initial reaction. Everyone was just stunned. And therefore the Haredi world didn't know what to do. But by the next year, they'll have it worked out. This only a Haredi Rav could speak about the Haredi world this way. And you have to listen to what he has to say. And he goes on, and he says, L'shana bava, oh, everyone's going to work together, and we're going to go ahead and have something. And then he says, the Rabbanut again spoke out about this, but from the other Gedolim Shlita, nothing. On the contrary, there were the advertisements and there were announcements made. And what were the announcements made? Don't do what?
Celebrate.
Don't celebrate. That's what came out. Don't say how. Don't celebrate. Don't change tefillah. Don't. Nothing. And he says, Shud v'chiyuvi, nothing positive. Lo pursa mehem. Lo nishmakom motzei gedolei Torah. We didn't know anything from the Badats, from the Gedolei Torah. He's talking about the Charaidi Gadolim. That's what he's saying. He's saying we didn't know anything. And everyone was subject to this miracle. Everyone was subject to total lashmadat totalit. We were all subject to total destruction. All of us, he says. Hadavar garam rak la absurd. Wow. So Rav Davlitsky says it came to an absurd thing. Normally, the piety of a person, how he davens with such kavana and says Tehillim and his Shmona Esrei with such passion and devekus. And here, the less you say, the more firm you are. That was the barometer. And those people that are saying extra Tehillim of Mashiv la Hashem or B'tzeisi Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, these guys, we have to wonder if they could count them for minyan. They're not so firm. Oh, you don't say anything? Ooh, kol hakavod, you're a tzaddik. He says, this is crazy. What happened? This is what happened over here.
So he was critical of the Haredi world?
He's critical. He says, I don't understand. It's more sad than matzchik, than funny. Midas, the Haredi Yuto, the Yirat Shamayim and Haredi barometer is always by how much you daven and connect with Hashem and your tfilos. But over here, it's the opposite. There's such great things that happen, and the Ruchnius and the Baal Tshuva, so many great things happen. And then in the Modia newspaper, which obviously was around in 67, 68, the rabbis of Chutzlas, I don't know which rabbis they are, they put an ad in. And they wrote, no change in that tefillah at all. Dad, if any new minhag, he says, what do you mean new minhag? I've just shown that the minhag of having a Purim is existing for centuries. We've done that. The Gadol of Gadolim, the Chayim Adam, the Chassam Sofer, the giants, they all do this. What do you mean making up something new? What are you talking about? He says, how do you call this something new? Ha'im ne'amu mehem kol yimei Purim. They don't know about what happened over here. They don't know about the history of all the Purims that we set up over the years. All the Rabbanut did was kavat hayom hazeh yesod she'imei Purim shekilot hayuduim. They just went ahead and set this up. And if another group of rabbis doesn't like certain details, and they don't want to do whatever you want, but just a yom to recognize and thank Hashem for what He's done for us. And you want to holler, you don't want to holler. You want to see tachanun, you want to do whatever you want. But something. Acknowledge Hashem's bounty and His gift that He gave us. And He finishes off. Which day do you want to do it on? You want to do it on this day, you want to do it? Fine. When do you want to set it up? Because you have 6 days to the war. And each day was another miracle. Today, as you mentioned, was the Chevron day. Each day something else happened. We had the south one day, north one day, Yerushalayim one day. So however you want to do, you want to do it the big first day of the war, the last day of the war, whatever you want to do. And however you want to do it, but something, he says. And I think minimally you should not say tachanun. All of the places, all of the Purims that we had in the 80 places, they minimally didn't say tachanun. And you want to do Hallel with a full Hallel after Tefillah, however you want to do it. And you have a Sudas mitzvah. And having a Sudas mitzvah, what's the problem having a Sudas mitzvah? We're at the Suda, you thank Hashem for the miracles. What's the problem with that? And then he says, we need to have all the groups talk together, all the rabbis, the Badatzim and the Rabbanut, and they all work together to set up a national unified day. Unfortunately, we're so far away from that. So far away from that. But I think it's fascinating. My goal here is not to show his Kriyas Charaidi world. That is not my goal at all. Okay? Not at all. It is to go ahead and have a Gadol from the Charaidi world, who for whatever reason, they accepted so many of his psaks. Every calendar, go to any shul you're in and look at the calendar, and you'll see him quoted hundreds of times. For whatever reason in this area, they did not accept him, and that's whatever reason they didn't, but that's not my goal to say why they didn't accept him. My goal is to focus on this concept of, you just asked, how can you set up a new holiday? Rav Charaidi Gadol is saying the sources are endless about setting up. It's called a Purim, where it's brought down. And to finish off, the biggest posek of the 20th century, hands down, that everyone accepts. Everyone accepts.
Moshe Feinstein?
Well, he was in America, but even broader than Rav Moshe. Everyone except Rav Moshe, you're right about that. We could give a list, but I think everyone would probably put him on the top of the list. The Chafetz Chaim. Does he have this concept of making a Purim when a miracle happens to the community? Does he? Yes. He mentions it several times. So when he brings it down, it's obviously not a Tziyoni thing. It's just part of our Masorah to set up. So in Yetz Hashem, we should all, and each person, whatever your Rav tells you to do, Hallel, no Hallel, I don't care about the details. What I care more about is here, to have Hakaras Hatov to Hashem, that we are living in miraculous times. Many of us, most of us in the room, no, not most, every one of us in the room was alive in 67, everyone here. Some of us remember it more, some less. We are living in miraculous times, and God forbid to be the benefits of His brachos and benevolence and not have feelings of what? Hakaras Hatov. Whether it's through Hallel, with a bracha, not through this mishteh, or just feeling every day you walk around. You go to Yerushalayim, well, thank you, Hashem. You go to Hebron, thank you, Hashem. You go to the Golan, thank you, Hashem. This wasn't here a few years ago. I couldn't have done this. And now I got, thank you, Hashem. Minimally, that to me, every single person has to have that feeling of Hakaras Hatov, not one day a year, not 6 days a year, 365, 24/7. And thank you that I'm here and I'm alive during this miraculous period. A belated Chag Sameach to everyone, and we just go from Geula.
Happy Chevron Day.
Happy Chevron Day. Everyone should be well.
Chodesh Tov.